Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. We're glad you could take time out to join us. I'm your host, Hamid, Rasheed. Today in our program, we'll be talking about the crisis in Lebanon. In a recent CBC interview following the Israeli invasion of Lebanon on June the 6th of this year, Ben Prossin, who is the Deputy President of the Canadian Zionist Federation, made some remarks in a CBC interview which reflected negatively on the non-aligned nations' participation in the United Nations generally, and more particularly with respect to the Arab-Israeli conflict. In today's program, we will discuss these remarks with Mr. Prossin, along with an assessment of the crisis in Lebanon. I have joining me on the program Mr. Ben Prossin, who, as I mentioned in our introduction, is the Deputy President of the Canadian Zionist Federation. Ben is a practicing lawyer in the Bedford-Sackville area. Ben, we're glad you could come on the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Talk to us. I also have joining us on the program a person I'm sure is no stranger to our Black Horizons audience. In fact, we've just finished a two-part series with Celestine Bassey, who is with the Political Science Department at Dalhousie. Celestine, welcome back to Black Horizons. You're getting to be a regular fixture here.
Thank you.
I'll double your salary now.
To double your salary, right. Well, Ben, I want to turn to you first of all and take you back to that interview on CBC that I caught last week, and we've talked a bit about it. The gist of your comments is, as I analyze them, respecting the non-aligned nations' participation in the United Nations, seem to suggest that the Afro-Arab or the Afro-Arab, Afro-Asian bloc had made the United Nations a more or less ineffective forum for the discussion of world issues, and I would think by extension the Arab-Israeli situation. You suggested that, in your opinion, the United Nations was no longer an institution of reason, that there seemed to be a lack of respect for justice, and that the attitude of many of the nations was characterized by an attitude of what I want is what I'll get. And finally, I think you suggested that the United Nations has become a forum where only the hollow cries of a particular group are heard. I don't know, I may have done you some injustice in terms of analyzing your comment, but I'd like to ask you, were these in fact your views? Do you stand behind them? And if so, isn't this kind of a slap against the third world, and particularly the Afro-Arab bloc?
Well, you know, Hamid, I think that perhaps some of the comments that you've just made in quoting me sound harsh, but taken in context, in a proper context, are not that harsh. All of our institutions, of course, can always stand constructive criticism, and the United Nations, nonetheless, than our own legislature or parliament or any other group or organization. And when there appears to be a flaw, I think it's right to criticize, especially if you want to try to save or preserve a group, an organization that you think ideally is worthwhile in this world. I think we have to go back almost to the beginning, when the UN Charter was proclaimed and when the UN was founded. It was founded on some very lofty and idealistic principles, which were principles I think we could all emulate and which we would all support. And it was hoped that after the terrible, terrible scourge of war in 1945, that the world would see reason and light, and countries could work together to build a better life for themselves and their citizens on this small planet we call Earth. And for some years, I think the idealism of the UN, in fact, promoted this sort of world understanding. I think we've seen that in the decade of the 60s, for instance, Africa was basically liberated from colonialism, in a sense. I think that was in no small part, it was due to the influence of the UN and the debates held at the UN and the influence exerted upon the colonial powers. And in that respect, I think the UN served a purpose for which mankind could be grateful, and for which many citizens today in the world, I think, perhaps owe their independence. On the other hand, the UN through the 70s seems to have changed in terms of outlook and discussion and decision. Israel, which, by the way, is a creature of the United Nations, created by the United Nations by a decision in 1947, of the United Nations, seems to have been cast only in the villainous position when debates occur at the UN. All I'm saying is there seems to be an imbalance. And the imbalance in large part seems to have been caused by petrodollars. Petrodollars influence our politicians around the world, not only, I should point out, in the Afro-Asian community. Western Europe has adopted a much more pro-Arab stance in this Middle East conflict, I believe, as a result of the influence of certain oil-producing states. The petrodollars are important. The economies of the world are important. But at a certain point in time, surely people have to stand up and say, enough is enough.
But this wasn't the gist of the question, as I see
Well, the
it.
gist of the question, I think, has to be put in context
really
about
what
the
I'm
UN.
asking you to speak to
I'm
is
saying there is a flavor at the UN of
Yeah.
uneven-handedness. Uneven-handedness. That Israel's case can never be really heard. And as I said on the radio, if a representative of Saudi Arabia at the UN put forth a resolution that the world was flat, I think that they might just get that resolution approved. Because I think
But
the
that was-
UN has become influenced
Yes.
to a certain extent by petrodollars and by the politics of the communist and Arab bloc. We realistically have to look at it that way, I believe. Now, that does not say that other agencies of the UN are not and do not continue to do a good job. I refer specifically to UNESCO. I refer to the UNICEF program. I'm not saying that the United Nations is rotten through and through, and that's the impression that perhaps was given initially.
No, but I
I'm
guess
simply
what I-
saying that the political aspect of discussion at the UN has sunk to a level in which one case cannot even be reasonably heard. Can't even be reasonably heard. That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay. Be interested in getting your response, Celestine, in terms of the Mr. Prossin's comments, in terms of Ben's comments regarding the participation of the non-aligned communities in the debates in the United Nations concerning the Arab-Israeli situation, and in particular this situation in Lebanon at the moment.
Well, I must really say that Ben has actually made a passionate representation of the Israeli position on the crisis, and also with the United Nations involvement in the crisis. But I think much of what he has to say sounds as a rigmarole to me, because it's not only that it's not an adequate or proper representation or understanding of the politics within the United Nations. It also seems to me that it's also reflective, of recent development, considering the context in which such statements, about the responsibility of the Afro-Asian, Arab, and other non-aligned bloc, had the responsibility of their behavior in the United Nations. Well, what I would like to say that, considering the various contexts in which this has been made, it appears to me that from the part of Israeli representatives, not only their prime minister, but in the various representatives who have spoken, it appears to me that whoever does not stand up to be counted by Israel is always considered, against Israel. I mean, the West German Vice Chancellor became a Nazi overnight for urging circumspection on Begin and his policies towards the Palestinians. Schmidt, West German Vice Chancellor, was called a Nazi. It was then the Time magazine and also various magazine. So what I'm saying is that it
He
appears...
was, by the way, in the German army in World War II. Although
Well,
don't call him a Nazi. He was a participant in the Nazi military program.
Well, I mean, for urging circumspection on Israel, he became a Nazi. The Israelis did not see a statement in the context for which he was making that exercise of circumspection is more in the long run, more in the long run amenable to both sides in terms of settlement of the conflict. So that's one side of the question. One knows very well, as Ben himself has actually stated, that in the 50s and the 60s, when most African and Asian countries did share the idea of Israel, the David fighting the Arabs, the Goliath, that the sympathies of these countries were very much on Israel, especially because of the Arab rhetoric of the destruction of Israel. But now that these countries have realized, especially after 1973, that Israeli military hegemony within the subsystem had been accompanied by a reversal of role, it's now that the Israelis who are now playing the Goliath, their attack on Iraqi plants, for instance, in spite of the fact that Israel itself has not signed the NPT and also has being the first, to install nuclear plant within that subsystem, and has refused the United Nations agency anything to do with inspection of its nuclear plant. Its unilateral annexation of the Golan Heights and also West Bank and Gaza Strip. If Begin's recent statement that Israel will never annex the West Bank and the Gaza Strip because it's already a part of Israel is to be interpreted, within the context of the fact that Begin has already incorporated, these two regions into Israel. So what I'm saying is that, in a way, the accusation of irresponsibility do not reflect, the realities within the United Nations itself. On the one hand, that it has been quite a prejudicial position on the part of Israeli representative. On the other hand, everybody knows that the UN is not such an organization, that runs on a community of feelings, that they had been in existence within the United Nations. Blocs, voting bloc, the Western Bloc, for instance, which has always, it has 2 of its members with veto power in the Security Council and always acted in the interest of the U.S., in the interest of Israel, especially the U.S. We have the caucus of Latin American nations. We also have the Afro-Asian Bloc. So the U.S., the politics of the United Nations itself, had been anything but responsible. But the question here is, when we find that, the United States, for instance, who could exercise double veto, had in the first place in the Security Council, like the question of attack on Iraqi plans, been able, to influence even the resolution. That's the non-procedural side of the question before even the resolution itself is on the agenda. And also we've seen that the United States itself, when in the 50s and 60s, that she had no trouble commanding the majority in the United Nations, and which many American scholars, including in Claude, this book, Swords into Plowshares, that is used by all universities, had, among others, indicated that when the U.S. had no problem commanding majority in the United Nations through its influence, the question of irresponsibility of many developing countries did not arise. Now that it has lost that majority, simply because these countries find that, its interest is not always coterminous with that of the United States and Israel, while the accusation of irresponsibility has arisen. So, I mean, judging within the proper context of the politics of the United Nations, I would very much differ with Ben's statement both on the CBC and here, because it's not a proper reflection of the reality.
In an interview last week, where it appeared in Time magazine, where the Israeli sources were
Don't
quoted.
believe everything you read, Hamid.
I don't believe everything I read. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to it, but this was a direct quote now. In asking about the aims behind the invasion of Lebanon, one of the sources responded that the aims of the invasion was not only to push back the Palestinians, but also to break them militarily. Then a direct quote, the foreign minister, the current foreign minister of Israel, Yitzhak
Mr.
Shamir, he was more blunt in his response. He said, we must strive for the PLO's, this is a direct quote now, for the PLO's ultimate destruction. Defense Minister Sharon has made similar kinds of direct statements in direct interviews. How can you justify the right to destroy the Palestinians?
Because what you have just quoted to me,
Yeah.
you have to carefully understand.
Mm-hmm.
The foreign minister has called for the destruction of the PLO.
Mm-hmm.
The PLO is an organization of terrorists. There is no call for the destruction of the Palestinian people, but only of the PLO. The Palestinian people is not a monolith. First of all, many Palestinians live in different countries. Many are concentrated in Jordan. The West Bank, of course, has, I believe, 1 million. The PLO claims to represent Palestinians, but they are not the only representative of the Palestinian people. They've achieved a certain level of political recognition for all kinds of political reasons. There are moderate Palestinians prepared to sit and talk with Israel about an arrangement of autonomy in the West Bank, who now are afraid to speak up in public too loudly because only 2 months ago 2 of their leaders in the West Bank were killed by PLO assassins for daring to speak up. On the West Bank, in fact, there is now something called the Village League system. These are villages of Palestinians who want to work with Israel to create a stable economy and an autonomous West Bank area, leading perhaps, who knows, perhaps to statehood. I'm not ruling that out. But the PLO is not the they cannot be equated. And in our minds,
How
often
can
in
you
the
say
West,
that,
we
Ben?
equate
It
them.
seems to me that the only people in the world who don't
The
recognize
PLO is a
Palestinians-
terrorist army.
All right. The only people in the world, it seems to me, that don't recognize the Palestinians as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinians seems to be the United States and Israel.
No, not so. Many countries of Western Europe and some countries of the Afro-Asian bloc do not recognize the PLO as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Not at all.
Stephen, what's your view on this
Well, I should
suggestion that the PLO are terrorists?
Well, I should take serious exceptions now with Ben, because his understanding of terrorism seems to me, maybe from a purely legal point of view, and at least, excuse him, he's the lawyer. But the word terrorism, terrorism as a term is from the word terror, and terrorism shares the same content, with the exercise of massive military power, in the way that Israel has done recently in Lebanon, in that it is the use of violence to achieve specific ends. So this is what terrorism and the use of military power shares. Both use violence and instrument to achieving certain goals. The difference is that terrorism happens to be the instrument of the weak, like guerrilla warfare. Terrorism is part and parcel of guerrilla warfare. And you can see this in Vietnam, you can see this in Algeria, in Africa, even when the United States was fighting for its independence. The early American revolutionaries were using terror against the British.
troops, though. Troops, not
Okay,
civilians.
I'm coming. Well, in Africa, the point is that terrorism is an instrument of the weak. The exercise of military power is an instrument of the strong. And when you use terror, the message is very much political, as it is military. You want to create an atmosphere of collapse. And one way of creating an atmosphere of collapse is to get at the people that support the establishment that is exercising military power. Now, within the Middle East context, apart from the fact that, Ben has tried, not totally plausibly, to draw a distinction between begging and his going underground and the present PLO setup and their strategy, such as far as I'm concerned, and other analysts have made this very clear, on the Middle East. There's a whole lot of literature. You can hardly draw that distinction. It depends on who is speaking. The Israelis will speak and call the PLO terrorists, and the PLO and their supporters will call themselves freedom fighters. So it depends on whose side you actually are. But the fact still remains that, the act of terrorism had been exercised by both sides in the Middle East. We've seen, I came across, in their autobiography of the former Israeli defense minister, that's the late Moshe Dayan, where, for instance, the present defense minister, that's Sharon, when he was a major, he led a group of his own regiment and blew up 70 houses, of Palestinians, just because one Israeli was killed. That's an act of state terrorism. A military institution has, the difference, from in that it is, the act of legitimate violence is concerned. But if a military commander like Sharon, as a major, could act on his own, blow up 70 houses, and when he was asked, didn't you know that there were people living there? He said he did not, whereas he knew that, more than 90 people were killed in that attack. And also the so-called Israeli dissidents, like Felicia Langley and Kromowski, have actually indicated the terror that had been carried out by Israeli military establishment on the West Bank, which until now was hardly reported. In fact, just about 5 years ago, a whole houses of the Palestinians on Gaza Strip were totally demolished by Israelis, and the justification was that they wanted to create a military highway. In response, the UN came in with a resolution asking Israelis to rehabilitate them. So this is an example whereby you can see that the act of terror, which is essentially violence, in violence as a means to achieving political goal, has been exercised by both sides. But of course, PLO has to be called terrorism because it has to be, you just have to call a dog a bad name in order to kill it. But it's simply not going to solve the problem. And as Ben himself, out of Kamara's conversation, has admitted, there are various splintered groups within the Palestinian camp. The fact is that if anything positive had been done coming from the Palestinian community, the PLO will not be associated. If, like the recent killing of Israeli ambassador, which had been carried out by a group from based in Jordan and also in Iraq, while the PLO will be drawn in because it is in the interest of Israel to perpetuate the image before the wall of a PLO being a terrorist group, which there's nothing wrong about that because, I mean, that's the only means available to them to fight the state of Israel, to fight for their own legitimate right on the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as they have, indicated. So what I'm saying in effect is that, how bad the word terrorism is depends on the speaker.
Celestine, in your view, what's your assessment of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon? What do you see as being the aims behind it? And I'll come over to you, Ben, and get your...
Well, one could look at the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, as a culmination, of a development, that had been part and parcel of Israeli overall strategy. You did mention the diaries of, for instance, Moshe Sharet, who was the second Israeli prime minister. I've also read the diary myself, and it's clearly stated there that in his conversation with Ben Gurion, that they have always seen, a strategy of neutralizing Lebanon, either through the creation of a Christian state in the southern Lebanon, which is amenable to Israeli policies. But the Israelis have to be sure, that, another front, like, the Sinai, the West, Jordan and the West Bank, and then the Syria, does not really occur in Lebanon. So that diary had actually stated clearly, that Israel had a long-term objective of neutralizing Lebanon, either through, the creation of a Christian state in the southern Lebanon, amenable to itself, or having a regime in Beirut, or while having a regime in Lebanon, while, although not totally, partial or impartial either to Israel or the Arab side, but will be able to maintain a policy of neutrality, that would favor, in terms of military strategic terms, at least Israel, the policy of Israel, towards keeping that northern border, outside the orbit, of another, the fifth front, for Israel. So it has been a long-term strategy, and both Israeli sources could be quoted for this. So there's the strategic aspect there, but maybe we also will eventually examine the political, I think, because there's a lot of political and content, to the Israeli present invasion, especially the extent and the ferociousness of his invasion of Lebanon.
Well, Ben, I hope you'll bear with me because I wanted to refer you to a statement that was made by Sharon, the defense minister, who seems to be directing this, taking a personal...
Well, he is the Minister of Defense.
He's the Minister of Defense, and he's been very involved in it. In a 90-minute interview, if you bear with me for a moment, a 90-minute interview last week with a Time correspondent, David Havley, I believe his name was, Sharon discussed the invasion of Lebanon. He said, what's happening is an immense blow to the Palestinian and international terror movement. Whatever the impact of our strike, it will take them a lot of time to reorganize and to start operating again. The bigger the blow is, and the more we damage the PLO infrastructure, the more the Arabs in the West Bank and Gaza will be ready to negotiate with us and establish coexistence. I am not sure whether the destruction of these organizations will convince the ransom-paying Arab governments to abandon the PLO, but I am convinced that the echo of this campaign is reaching into the house of every Arab family in the West Bank and Gaza. My question growing out of that quote is, isn't the Israeli invasion of Lebanon an attempt to effectively scuttle the West Bank autonomy negotiations?
No, you've just read for yourself, Hamid, the quote. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Defense, one moment, if I could just answer, you asked me the question and you gave me a quote.
All right.
I'm suggesting to you, what he says is 100% accurate. The echoes of this war are going to every home in Gaza and the West Bank. And the echoes are that the PLO, who has terrorized in a certain sense some of their own moderate people, Palestinians before, are no longer to be considered all-powerful.
But you seem to be suggesting that there somehow can be an agreement with the West Bank people.
I certainly
without the Palestinian, without the PLO.
Without the PLO.
Without the PLO.
Yes, sir, because the Palestinians are not the PLO. The Palestinians are an ethnic group of people, however you describe them, who are not simply represented by the PLO. The PLO
The Palestinians haven't said that. The Palestinians
some have. I'm
Palestinians
sorry.
as a
I'm
group
sorry,
have said
Hamid.
the PLO represents
Some
them.
have. The village leagues, which I spoke of, which have been established in the West Bank, they dissociate themselves from the PLO.
How many out of the total number?
Well, I'm telling you that the
What's the
PLO,
size
when
of
they
the
stand up
sentence
and speak,
component?
the PLO shoots their leadership. Of course they're afraid. But I think you'll agree with me. Forget government leaders. Forget politics. Forget armies. Are you
can't.
telling me...
They're all relevant.
But let's try for a minute and go to the people. Are you telling me that a farmer on the West Bank and a farmer in northern Israel both don't want to just farm their farms, harvest their crops, and deal with their neighbors?
No, because
Isn't that
I would
what life
suggest
is
to you-
all about?
I would suggest to you that the Palestinian people are much more sophisticated than that, and that the thing
And
that
so
I
are
f-
the Israelis.
the
But
thi-
two civilized peoples can surely live with each other in peace.
But the thing that I find difficult about the Israeli position is that everything seems to be defined from from an Israeli perspective. If the Palestinian people, for example, get together and decide that these are to be our representatives, then that is suspect. That the Palestinians don't really want to say that. It's because they're afraid of being shot or killed or whatever the case may be, and that they have no right to determine who represents them. That it seems to me, and I'll let you respond a minute. It seems to me that what's happening here is that an attempt by the Israelis to say, yes, we'll talk, but you're determining who will be the participants in the talk, who will speak for whom, and then you'll negotiate with them. That doesn't seem fair.
If I can just respond. The Israelis have said they're ready to sit and talk with any Palestinians. Not
Except the PLO.
Yeah, but the PLO for a reason. Because the PLO continue a campaign of murder and of destruction, and their avowed aim and their covenant
But we've
is
gone
to
over
destroy
that.
Israel. But all I'm saying is you cannot blame Israel for not wanting to talk with the PLO.
Well, we haven't been very kind to our guests. We've sort of had a
Celestine.
monologue going here.
Well,
I'd like to get Celestine's point of
suppose,
view in terms of how he sees
I
it.
could have expected Mr. Ben to represent, the Israeli position any better than he has, but with a lot of contradictions now that is being, both Arabs, Israelis, and the Palestinians are now being confronted, with Begin's policy. This is a guy who feels that eventually, the West Bank will become autonomous, but every year he's increasing Israeli settlements on the West Bank. These settlements always starts as a military, security establishment, but then it blossoms into all Israeli settlement, and he has actually made it clear that, the West Bank, Gaza Strip is already part of Israel, but so I don't really know what other sort of autonomy talk he wants to grant to the Palestinians, apart from, autonomy that is totally defined by Israel. In fact, this is what has actually come out of making Sharon the defense minister, because, this is a guy who actually speaks out what he feels the position of the Israeli government had been. And recently, those people that confronted Israelis on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip were not their political leaders. They were ordinary people, in the streets. So if you feel that, these people, had been well treated by Israel, it is only the PLO that is to blame. Well, again, as I said, I just beg to differ with your definition of terrorism and also your definition of goals. I feel the only people who can define for themselves who they see as their legitimate political representative are the PLO. And so far, there's nothing has happened to disprove that in terms of on-the-spot interviews, and also in terms of the attitude of the Palestinian, both on the West Bank and the Gaza, that they feel that their representative is not the PLO. So as I can say, it is the Palestinians themselves who have to define. And I can assure you that eventually, because what is happening now, and I can really see another Falkland rising now within that territory. The Falkland crisis came because when Britain was a superpower, it went grabbing at all the land that it actually wanted. Annihilated the Tasmanians, and Aborigines in Australia, brought in their own people. They did the same thing on the Falkland, expelled the Argentinians.
The Britons
and they
repelled aggression.
and they felt that this, what I'm saying, when Britain was a superpower, so this morale has to be run. When they were superpower, they took over the Falkland, expelled the indigenous population, brought in their own people. What I'm saying, they've done this in Gibraltar, in Ireland, in Australia, in Tasmania, in Africa. So then the Argentinians could not confront them because Argentina was a weak power. The morale that Israelis should draw, as well as the military power of this time, that the fact that they have military supremacy. We all know that the West Bank and the Gaza was not part of Israel before
Gentlemen,
1967.
I hate to interrupt. But time is all too short. I've got to cut you off. It's a complex issue. I've enjoyed discussing it, debating it, being intensively involved in it. Unfortunately, we've exhausted our time. We've got to sign off. We want to thank you for watching. Join us next week.
and gentlemen. My name is Byron, and as you can see, we got rid of that dummy Rasheed. And for once in our life, we're going to have a good show because I'm kind of sexy. And so let's get started with the old Black Horizons program, and let's hope that Rasheed guy don't show up. Thank you very much for joining.
No, you're going to be good. You're going to be good, all right? Be good. You're going to be good if it kills you, all right?
Yeah, but I was just...
I don't care what you were just doing. You're going to be good.
Well, excuse me.
Yeah, okay. So, how do you feel today?
I feel good.
That's good.
Yeah. Can I show you something?
What?
Can I show you something?
Yeah, okay.
Hold my hand. Now hold my hand.
Okay.
Hold it up.
Hold it up.
Hold it up.
All right.
Okay, what do you see?
I see your hand, and I see my hand.
Good, good. Now take a nice, good, close look.
Got it.
Now who do you think is the youngest?
What did I just get done telling you?
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. You know we're on the Black Horizons program.
Yes, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Good.
Have you got on your your TV makeup?
Yeah.
Yeah. Looks nice.
Thank you.
Is that pancake?
No, that's acrylic.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
So tell me, Byron.
Yeah.
How are you and your girlfriend getting along?
We had a fight last night.
A fight?
Yeah.
Was it serious?
I killed her.
No, that's nothing to joke about. You two been hanging for a long time.
Yeah. And I don't know what I see in her, 'cause she's ugly.
She is not ugly.
She's ugly.
Beauty is only skin deep.
Yeah, well, somebody should skin her whole body.
I don't think that's smart.
Well,
Did you meet her father?
yeah.
You did.
Yeah. As soon as I did, something told me I better leave.
What made you think that?
That shotgun he was holding.
Byron, he likes you, but he just thinks you're a bit too cheeky.
Yeah.
How come yesterday when you were talking to him, you were sticking your tongue out at him?
Well, you'd stick your tongue out too. Somebody was choking you.
Byron. Well, tell me, you and your girlfriend didn't fight all night, did you?
No, we didn't.
You didn't.
No, sir.
Did you, kiss her goodnight? Byron, did you kiss her goodnight?
Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be.
Actually, did you kiss her goodnight?
There will be no answer. Let it be. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Very cute. Well, I don't understand it.
Yeah, who's there?
What?
Who's there?
Oh, let me introduce you to somebody, okay?
Okay.
Byron, this is Muhammad Rasheed. Muhammad Rasheed, this is Byron.
How'd you do?
You do, Byron?
Yeah.
Oh, bye. Well, you're quite a scamp, Byron.
Scamp, what's that supposed to mean?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, in case you may have noticed, we're going to be having a special program today with very special guests in the person of Michael Robinson and his dummy and his
At least
partner,
at least I got an excuse, huh? Yeah.
and his
Boy, I hate
partner
that.
Byron.
Okay.
Michael is from Truro, and those of you who watch the program regularly may recall about 2 years ago when we had Michael rather, and Ellison on the program at that time. Well, Michael, we're glad to have you back.
Thanks.
What happened with Ellison?
I burned him. No, I still keep him home. Like, I do an act now with two of them, eh?
Yes.
And I put Elson on his knee, and he does ventriloquism.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very good ventriloquist.
Byron is a
Yeah, he is a ventriloquist.
Yeah.
Tell him how you got started.
Oh, it's easy. You get in front of the mirror, and you practice, and practice, and practice, and pretty soon, you'll be able to do it like this. See that? Can you do that? It's how they do it, you know?
Well, tell us, Michael, what have you been doing in the 2-year interval since we had you on our program last?
Well, I've been doing a lot of gigs like at banquets and stuff. And I did the Eddie Eastman concert. That was October 15th, 1981. I did that. And just performing and, getting a little bit better known, stuff like that.
Now, I understand that you may be giving some consideration to leaving Nova Scotia and going off to perhaps Toronto.
Yeah, I was thinking about going to Toronto this summer. I got in touch with the actress Lenore Zan, and there is an agency in Toronto that specializes in comedians. And so I'm going to be going up there, and hopefully they're going to see my act. I guess she said that they wanted to see it. She took the My Atlantic Insight interview, so we'll just see what develops from that.
Right. Had you known her before, or had she heard about you from somewhere? Or how did
She is from Truro,
Oh, I
but
see.
I had never really known Lenore Zan.
Right.
But her mother used to be one of my teachers, and she told me I should call her up and talk to her, find out, information about agents. So I called her up, and she gave me a lot of help.
Well, now, how did you get this character, Byron? You
Well,
went from Ellison to Byron. He's
yeah.
quite a colorful fellow.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, well, Byron was designed by myself. I drew a picture up of him, and I sent him to the picture to Santa Barbara, and a professional over there built him. They take a block of wood, and they carve the face on it. Then they cut the head in half, put all the mechanics in, and that's pretty well how they get them. So we sent it back.
So this fellow, what you're saying is this fellow's just another block of wood.
Yeah.
I already sent that. I don't think that's nice. After all, I'm the star.
Yeah, he has different forms of recreation. He likes reading.
Yeah,
What kind of books do you read?
the good kind,
What kind's the good kind?
the nice kind,
What kind's the nice kind?
the dirty kind.
Control yourself.
Yeah, I heard this one magazine. It was called Ooh Wee.
Byron, I think that's pronounced we.
I took a look inside that thing and I said Ooh Wee.
What do kids know about the birds and the bees, right?
Right.
I know they got nothing to do with it.
Well, you know, when we sit here and we laugh and we chuckle, and as Byron makes his jokes and so on, it's quite amusing.
Yeah.
But in talking to you before going on today's program, I guess being a ventriloquist,
Yeah.
is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Ventriloquist. I have difficulty getting around that word. Isn't all the fun that it sometimes appears to be?
It's not what it's cracked up to be at times. Like, there's difficult times, and some people expect you, like, a lot of people accuse me of being crazy.
Yeah.
Because the stereotype from the movie Magic, and magic is ruining, hurting my career,
Yeah.
like it's hurting many other ventriloquists, because people come up, they say, hey man, do you take it to bed with you?
Yeah.
And do you carry it around everywhere you go? And I don't know why the stereotype stuck, because people see doctors killing their patients on TV every day,
Yeah.
But people aren't afraid to go to the doctors.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what it is. But I think it's because people find the doll so real themselves that they don't find it too hard to believe that the ventriloquist would think it was real, when he's really got a lot to worry about in the manipulation and saying his routines properly and his timing and all that. I don't really see how someone could forget all that and let him do it on his own.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Right. So you have a little bit of problem trying to dispel that negative stereotype.
Yeah, well, sometimes you'll meet people and they'll say, well, I hear after about a year or two, you guys go nuts.
Yeah.
And you're crazy and you're taking it to bed with you and you're feeding it food and all that, but I think people are more intelligent than that.
Yeah. You were also saying that it can be hard sometimes in terms of being able to, in terms of privacy, people wanting you to.
Yeah, that's another problem, especially when you're traveling. Some people will see you and you'll be stuck on a bus or on a train doing your gig, but that's not really the problem. The problem is that some people can't take no for an answer. Like, generally, if you feel like doing it, you'll do it, right? And even if you don't really feel like doing it, you will do something quick. But some people, even if you feel like, you've been performing for about a week and you just don't want to do anymore, some people insist that you perform. And they're the ones that are hard to deal with, because you say, no, I ain't going to do it. Oh, you're doing it. I'm having a party now. You're coming, sort of thing. And, they get mad at you if you don't. Like, every time I'm invited to a party, I'm pretty well asked to bring him. I seldom do, because, I don't enjoy my evening as much when I'm working, because this is my line of work. This is what I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, now tell us a bit, for those who perhaps didn't catch the first time you were on our program, how long have you been at this?
I've been doing ventriloquism since I was about 13 or 14. And I've been doing magic and all that since I was about 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. And I just started juggling and hypnotism and escapes recently, about 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. How did you get started in all of this?
Just an interest in puppets. I found out one day that I could do it a little bit. I was watching Sherry Lewis on TV, and I tried it a little bit, but I didn't pay any mind to it. I used to be able to make the phones talk. When I got about 13 or 14, I said, well, I'm going to, work at it. And I just worked at it, and I've been still working at it. And it's developed a little better and better every time.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I go and talk to him, like he has to go do something like that.
You're going to be good? Promise?
Well, now, you mentioned that this fellow, Byron, was custom-made in California. What about your previous character, Allison? Did you make him yourself?
No, I ordered him from a professional ventriloquist over in the States, in Colorado, I believe it was.
I see.
That was some time ago. I had it longer than I thought I did. I didn't think that I'd really had it that long, but I did. That's really what I got my start with.
Right.
Yeah, so I could never get rid of it or anything like that.
Right.
I still keep it at home. It's got sentimental value.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, now, is this still pretty much a hobby for you, or are you thinking about...
Right now, I'm kind of like on the links of semi-professional, which doesn't mean you're good. It just means you're getting paid for your performances, eh? And it's hard to say. It still feels, to me, it's like fun,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes it's hard and it's not all fun, but basically it's fun. And people say when you're professional, it's not fun. I don't know. So it's hard to distinguish between professional and semi-professional. So the way I look at it, if you're working and you're making the money and you're providing for yourself, then you're professional.
Right.
If that's your only source of income.
But I guess what I was trying to get to, Michael, is are you planning to pursue this now full time, or will you work part time and continue to do the performances as you have in the evenings, or just where are you going from here?
I think from here I'd probably end. I think I'll take it on professionally because I'm starting to know the right people, eh? And a lot of people want to see the act, and they're interested in some part of the act, eh? So well, I think I'll probably go professional. Hopefully I'll have some luck in Toronto this summer. I can't say for sure, but I'm hoping. Like I said, I know the right people.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, in addition to working with Allison and with Byron and so on in terms of ventriloquism, that's an awful word, you also do other things, like you have magic and you do comedy and so on, is that right?
Yeah.
I wonder if perhaps I could get you, could I ask you maybe to
Yeah,
do
well,
something?
okay, like I said, there's different types of magic. There's sleight of hand, there's escapes, all different types. I want to show you what's called mentalism.
Yes.
Or what's known as mentalism. Now, I'm not really going to go into this because we only have so much time. I'm going to show you a quick mentalist routine with the cards here. Now, that is no part of mentalism. That's basically your sleight of hand moves there, right? But, you know, you mix them up, it looks okay. Okay, what I want you to do is just pick one of these cards here. Any one. Okay, look at it. Do you know what it is? Now place it back into the deck anywhere you like. Okay, now take the cards and shuffle them to your heart's content, will you please?
Well, I'm not very good at shuffling. I think I might have turned a couple of them over.
Okay.
I'm not much of a card player.
Okay, what hand did you pick the card with?
This hand.
That hand, can I see that hand?
Yes.
3 of hearts.
That's
That's
right.
the card? Yeah. Well, I told you back, it's quick, yeah.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, now you say mentalism. Can you explain something about that?
Mentalism is like, well, everybody's seen Kreskin.
Yes.
Mentalism is a form of magic, and some people don't even classify it as magic, that deals with the mind. Anything that deals with the mind. Some people make the mistake of linking telekinesis and, you know, ESP and all that stuff with mentalism. They are not mentalism. Mentalism is doing conjuring without the tinge of the occult. Right? Like a lot of people say that some magicians are witches. I've been called a witch, right? But the fact is, a magician is a person that does these miracles without witchcraft or the occult or anything. That I don't know anything at all about witchcraft. All I know is this stuff here. I'll show you a quick sleight of hand just so you get the idea. What card is that?
7 of hearts.
7 of hearts? Okay, say go.
Go.
Gone.
7 of clubs.
Yeah. Well, see, that's sleight of hand. Some people will think that that is real magic, but it's not. Of course, you've got your flourishes. That must be the couple that you turned over. Here's my famous one-hand card. I invented this myself. It's got about 12 different steps to it. I used to do this one, but everyone does that, so I don't do it anymore. But like a lot of people, there's one school of magicians that believes you shouldn't use any skill whatsoever. You should never take a deck of cards and give them a one-hand cut, because people will say, well, no wonder he got the aces together. Look at the way he can handle the cards, right? But my books is from the other school of magic. They say if a man wants to see a magician handle a deck of cards like his next-door neighbor, he'll go to his next-door neighbor, sort of thing. So I combine the both of them.
Well, it must take an awful lot of practice to develop these skills that you've acquired over the years.
Well, yeah, it does, yeah. You have to work at it.
And how does one go about, for the youngsters who might be interested in pursuing this kind of thing, how does one go about becoming a musician and learning these kinds of tricks? Is there schools that you can go to? Is there material that you can read? Or,
yeah, there is material that you can read, and there are schools that you can go to. I wouldn't advise, you know, like I'm not going to say do it the same way I did it, because I have never had a magic lesson in my life. And I've only seen one real magician in my life, like up close I was talking to, and this was just last year. And I pretty well just sat in my room, excuse me, watched magicians on TV and tried to duplicate, improvise, work my way around. I read material, but I found I learned a lot more from experience and trying things, and I had to use my head a lot. Like I said, I've never had a magic lesson in my life, but there are schools for magicians. I checked about one in Toronto, but there wasn't one. There was supposed to have been. The magician, Dickie Dean, was supposed to have enrolled in that school. And I checked that, and they say there's no such thing in Toronto.
So really, it's something that you pretty well have to acquire on your own. If the interest is there, you...
Yeah, in some cases, yeah, in many cases. Sometimes you could get somebody whose father is a magician, and he could teach his son all he wanted to know about magic. Or some people might, be like myself and just read a little bit and watch professionals on TV and catch on to a couple of things. It's really hard to say. But I do different types of magic. I do sleight of hand with balls, silks, coins, and I think the mentalism is the thing that most people are amazed by, because they say, well, how does he do it? They just see you doing all this stuff, and they know it deals with the mind. Predictions, clairvoyancy, stuff like that. Like you'll have an envelope on the table and tell someone to think of a card, and they'll open the envelope, and the name of the card they're thinking of is written on the envelope. It's done beforehand, clairvoyance. Supposedly, you could predict what card they were going to think. And the mentalist, what he has to do is beat the odds. It's like a gambler. Anytime you see a man go to a racetrack and bet $2 million on a horse, you know he knows something, right? And like, he's not just going on a hunch. With mentalism, you have to go by hunches a lot, and you do take a lot of chances. I mean, it wouldn't be surefire for somebody who didn't know what to do it. If I said, look, here's how you do this, you do this, you do that, it probably wouldn't work, because it has to be surefire. You have to be able to take chances, and you have to be very confident, and you can't make a mistake.
But there is a definite science to it, that once you learn this
Oh, yes, there is science to it, yeah. Well, ESP and clairvoyancy, all those things itself, things that the mind is supposed to be capable of doing, are science. Like, science has been dealing with them for years. But the problem is, they did a test one time with ESP, and they had these people try to distinguish the difference between these cards. They have one with a star, one with a circle, one with a rectangle. They have the 5 cards that they use, one with wavy lines. And what they did was they had these people try to distinguish which cards they were looking at in another room. But what they did was they recorded how many had been right, but they didn't record how many the people had gotten wrong. And that was a big problem, because a lot of that had been going on. They say, well, look, he got a 10 out of 20. But the other 5 tests, he might have got 3 out of 20, eh? But see, what they had a tendency to do was to record the best recording. They'll say, well, keep doing it, and we'll give them the best, recording. And it's really hard to deal with.
Yeah. Well, now, you must have read extensively to sort of acquire the knowledge, this knowledge of, in this particular area. This is not something that you can just sort of observe on TV and pick up. I mean, it's a very intricate kind of subject. You must have read extensively in this particular area.
Well, I did not just stuff on magic and sleight of hand and mentalism. I've studied stuff on hypnosis. I've hypnotized people to help them to quit smoking, and in reading about
Hypnosis?
hypnotism,
Yeah,
right, and hypnotics, you get those two mixed up.
Yes.
What you have to do is realize how the mind works, like the electroeleographic lines in the brain, how many times they wave together, what angles they're at. It's boring stuff to talk about, eh? But if you have an understanding of it, you can find a way of linking that with this, because the mind is a mind. No matter what property you're going to use, and if you're going to use a pen, a deck of cards, or a quarter, whatever you're going to do, you're still dealing with the mind. And the mind has familiar functions. Every mind has a familiar function. They all function the same way. People think differently, but when it comes to the subconscious mind and association, which is a major point in sleight of hand, people's minds all work alike.
Well, now, I don't know if it's fair to ask you to reveal your sources and so on, but how did you acquire all of this information? These aren't things that people would just normally go into a library and pick up material on, I wouldn't think.
Well, you'd be surprised. I got a lot of stuff from walking in the libraries. I find if you study psychology, if you know anything about sleight of hand, you create your own sleights, and then you study psychology, and you learn how to apply psychology to what you're doing, it helps. Like, you can get some books on magic that are good. Some of them just show tricks, right? I don't do tricks, I do effects. Tricks work out by themselves. And some of them just show effects, but they don't show how to present them properly. There's 3 types of technique. There's physical technique, manipulative technique, and there's psychological technique. And a lot of people and books have a tendency to leave out the psychological. That's why somebody, oh, I learned how to do card trick here. Pick a card, put it back. They don't know the psychological technique, how did I do it? And it looks more like a puzzle than an effect. But what you have to do is you have to build it up, like an author who writes a book. He doesn't just say, this one killed this one, that one killed that, he died, and that's it. They build it up. They put a little glint on it, make it shine a little bit. And usually the killer ends up being a guy with no more shine to him than the bottom of his shoe, eh? Try to make it something unobvious. You have to try to surprise the audience. But you have to have that right frame of mind, and most of all, you have to entertain. You must entertain. If you don't entertain, people will say, how did he do it, but they will not have enjoyed it. Some will be amazed, shocked, but they didn't enjoy it. You have to entertain. You have to make them laugh. A lot of my magic is comedy-oriented on stage. I tell a lot of jokes, just be myself, and you have to entertain the people.
Right. Well, now, in addition to, do you do any just plain, straight up, I don't know if it's plain, perhaps not the word, but I mean, do you do just straight humor without any of the aids, any of the effects?
Sometimes I do.
Stand-up comedy,
Yeah.
I guess it's called.
Yeah, like sometimes I do an act where I'll be up on stage introduced as a stand-up comedy, and they'll hear a voice yelling at me, or I have my suitcase half open, and they'll hear the voice inside, like a heckler, right? And eventually I'll go and pull him out. And like I try to make the material funny, but really with that it doesn't matter, because if it's phony material, if it doesn't get a laugh, the people are going to say, well, he just did that to set up the doll, right? And if it's good, the people enjoy the act twice as much. But
This is a very, it's really a profession. It's like an art. I mean, it isn't something that an ordinary person can just walk into and be a specialist at. I mean, it's not something that's cut out for everybody. It takes a special knack to do this kind of thing. I wonder if perhaps I could get you to show us maybe a few more tricks that would demonstrate the dexterity.
okay, well, I'll show you. Yeah, for the dexterity, demonstrating dexterity, the best thing is flourishes, okay?
Yeah.
Now, of course, you have your fans, right? Sometimes if you squeeze the cards a bit too hard, you get that little one,
Yeah.
okay? That's all just your basic fans and stuff. Your one-hand cuts, your swivel cuts. You know, that does, it took me a long time to get that. I sat there for days just doing just that, eh? Then after a while, I added the extra move in. Get that one there. Let's see if I can get that again. My hands are a little bit sweaty. It took me a little while to catch that one. And you've got your swivel cuts. Now, with coins, it's a different story. There's only one good flourish you can do with coins.
Yeah.
Like, coins are a specialty in itself. Coins are the hardest branch of sleight of hand there is. Okay, but there is only one flourish you can do with them, or a fancy move. And that's this little roll right here. Now, it's the only flourish you can do with a coin. See, what you're doing is making the coin walk back and forth across your knuckles.
Yes.
It is the only flourish that has ever been found and ever will be found for a coin. There's no other move you can do that's not a trick that looks good when it comes to coins. Any good coin manipulator should be able to do this. Like a lot of times you'll be doing tricks, people say, there's always one that knows how it's done.
Yes.
Right? I know how that's done, sort of thing. You know, I can do that. Ask them to do that. Because any good coin man should be able to. And you have a lot of fun trying to learn this, because I know I did. You can also bring it down around here to the bottom of the hand and bring it over again. That's the way the East Indians do it over in East India. Excellent magicians. They just bring the coin right down around like so. Put it through. Of course, the Chinese do it a little bit differently. They take the coin like that. Put it like this. So you can take that. Say go.
Go.
Gone. But those are just effects that you can do with coins. They're not really flashy.
How many hours a day do you have to practice? I mean, is these things you have to practice them constantly in order to keep your skills up? Or once
Yeah,
you
you
have the
have
trick
to-
mastered, does it pretty well stay with you? Or
No. If you master a trick, you can't say, well, I got it now, I don't have to practice it anymore, because you'll lose it. You'll lose the skill that it took to get for it. And like I said, this stuff isn't really easy. Some of it is. There is some sleight of hand that's not too difficult. But for some reason, I seem to like the stuff that took a little while to get into, probably because I like to have something to do with my time. So I'd sit there practicing moves like this, you know, cuts like that.
Yeah.
To some people, there's absolutely no purpose to doing that cut.
Yeah.
Right? But to me, it's a standard move.
Yeah.
And it's also great exercise for your fingers, because you have to have fingers in good shape. Your hands have to be, well, if I had aching fingers or arthritis, I wouldn't be able to do any of this.
Right.
So I work out with hand grips,
right?
squeeze a tennis ball now and then. Or as you see a lot of magicians just doing that little sleight of hand exercise like that, something like an acting exercise. You know, it just helps you get your fingers to move in harmony or some stuff like that. I don't know.
Right.
But I know it's an exercise.
Well, now when we think about skaters and people like that, they spend sometimes up to 2 or 3 hours, sometimes several hours a day.
Yes.
Boxers, for example,
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours practicing. Do you do this daily, or?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty well always walking around the house with a deck of cards in my hand or a quarter. Generally all the time. Because I'm watching TV. TV does not require too much concentration from you. All you have to do is sit there and watch it. It definitely doesn't require any physical things from you. So you can sit there with a deck of cards and practice. Now, being that you got to be able to do this stuff without looking at your hands anyway, TV is the ideal medium for practice. I can watch a 2-hour movie. For that whole 2 hours, I'll just be playing with the cards. And it gets to the point now where I don't even have to think about what I'm doing.
Right. Well, you've developed quite a reputation for cards. I guess perhaps not many of your friends would welcome you into a poker game.
No.
This
No.
would give you a definite advantage if you were to.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So-
Because I remember the card sharpening demonstration I did the last time I was on the program. But the problem isn't with that, because I don't play cards. Because someday I might need money really bad, and I might say, well, you know, hell, take
Yeah.
them and cheat. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to get started into that. The only problem I find is that a lot of people have tried to get me to deal. Like a lot of people tried to hire me as a dealer. I remember last year I was doing a performance. I won't say what it was. Someone tried to hire me as a dealer. And I told him, I said I didn't want to get involved in that, because I can win, you know, as many poker games as I like if I don't get caught, but they better not ever see my face again. And as I said, with me being that I want to go into this as entertainment-wise, there's no way someone's not going to see me again. And I don't really think it would be worth it. Plus, I couldn't see why people would take a skill like that and use it to cheat other people when they could be making an honest living at it. Most good card sharps aren't alive now.
Yes,
Yeah.
particularly in an area like Nova Scotia where the community
Yes.
is relatively small and it's pretty hard to remain anonymous.
Yeah, it's
in
very
an area
hard, yeah.
like this, but I think it's a very healthy attitude that you have in terms of the skill that you've been given. Well, I wonder, in terms of closing out today's program, if I could get you to bring, I keep wanting to call Byron Ellison. I don't
Yeah.
know, we formed quite an attachment to Ellison the last time he was on our program. In
Yeah.
fact, I remember chuckling for several days after the last appearance.
Yeah.
I wonder if perhaps we could get you to bring him back on for a few minutes. He may very well have some things that he'd want to share with us before we close out today's program. He made me promise before we came on the air that I would give the first few minutes to him and in the last few minutes, so
Yeah.
so as not to get into any difficulty with him. I think we better bring him back. I understand that Byron, that you have a big performance coming up next week with the big gathering, the Human Rights Conference.
Yeah,
It's
that's
gonna,
right, that's
gonna
right.
be held
yes,
here.
Yes, that's true.
Are you
How did
nervous?
know? He knows a lot, don't he? Yeah.
Are you at all nervous about the performing before all those distinguished people that
Me?
are going to be?
Me? No. Nah. I've been doing this stuff a long time. I'm getting used to it. Certainly. You want to see something? Wait, let's show them the gig.
Okay, we'll do the gig, okay?
Okay.
Do you know it?
Do you?
Yeah.
Then I know it too, don't I?
Okay, I'll start it off.
Okay. Hand on hand, where's your ma?
He's pretty good, eh?
Hand on hand, where's your pa?
Yeah, I like that.
What you gonna do when you get home?
Talented guy.
Don't stop playing that old hand bone. Hand bone, what do you say? Hand bone, what you doing today? What you gonna do when you get out, girl? Hand bone, gonna take around the world.
Yeah, he's good, yeah, he's tough.
Hand bone, what do you say? Hand bone, what you doing today? What you gonna do when you get home? Take a little trip, take a little trip, take a little trip down the railroad tracks.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
I didn't know. I knew that you was a comedian, Byron, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that you were a singer as well.
Oh, yes, I'm an excellent singer. Oh, yes. Now let's get another demonstration.
Okay.
Okay.
I've been everywhere, man, I've been everywhere, man.
Past the deserts, grand land, crossed the mountains, staring land.
I've been everywhere, man.
I've been everywhere.
Texas, Queensland, Minnesota, Indiana, New York, China, Belmont, Oregon, Washington, D.C., L.A., D.C., New York, London, Paris, Rio. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's talking about it. I've been everywhere.
Yeehaw! Yes, sirree.
Well, I think we're running out of time there, Byron. Do you have one more joke for us before we have to close out today's program?
Well, no, I think I'll just close it out and get it over with. It's kind of hot under these lights.
Okay, well, we'll let you wrap it up then, Byron.
Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to do the intro first?
Okay.
Hello, hello. We're here to start the show. I'm Mike.
I'm Byron.
Hello, hello, hello. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I'll sing and dance.
He'll dance and sing.
Wherever we go,
Whatever we do,
we're gonna go.
do it together. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, folks, the show's over.
Right,
You don't have to go home,
right.
but you can't stay here.
Okay, that's our program today. Thank you for watching.